thank you, Malcolm. That's a really good kind of intro, and I think we have kind of some quite similar views on some of this stuff, although we're going to have to kind of harmonize our terminology about it at some point. So I'm going to drill down into the cars side. So, classifieds, it's probably in autos an $8 to $10 billion business globally. So pretty big, as you all know. So what's so important about e-commerce? If we look at the used car e-commerce market, it's potentially a $1 to $2 trillion market. Okay, that's all the used car sales, and it's all the revenue from those used cars. The margin's a bit different from classified, so 20% net margin. That means you've got potentially, up to 300 billion of margin coming out of e-commerce potentially. Now, some of that won't go to e-commerce. There'll still be residual face-to-face sales and so on. And it all depends a little bit on what we mean by e-commerce, because, from the perspective we see, e-commerce, we think, is not about delivering cars. It's about doing the whole transaction electronically, whether you deliver or collect the car. And if you begin to think in that mindset, it then becomes a very big marketplace, market that is generally accessible, rather than being a niche of kind of delivered cars. So I'm going to try and answer 5 questions today. So first, are these new auto retailers at their 1% share maximum in the States a genuine threat to classifieds? What does the consumer really want in all of this? How are the classified services beginning to respond? What's going to be most critical to their success? And can they actually beat this new wave of digital auto retailers? So the valuations of e-commerce providers in autos have been collapsing recently, as I'm sure you know. On this chart, the light kind of part of the bar is the peak valuation of these businesses, and the dark part of the bar is the current valuation. I say current, they've fallen a little bit more since we produced this chart. So you've got Carvana down from a $62 billion valuation to a $6 billion valuation. And that has to beg the question of is this kind of all over in some way? If you look at the kind of competitors, I've got the closest competitors here, US grouping at the top, European grouping. Adevinta is now, it's heading towards being a 60% cars business, and it will become more than that over time. So it really is a key autos player. Cazoo in the UK. You can see that the classifieds have collapsed a bit as well, but the real collapse is amongst the growth stocks, the ones that require real capital investment, that are really being hit currently by the interest rates, the structural problems in the market, the risk of recession that's out there. But what we're not seeing is consumers saying, I don't like this model. What we're actually seeing is these services, aside from the fact that Carvana has had some operational troubles and has hit its consumer reputation a bit, but most of these services are delivering for the consumers in a way that the consumers are very comfortable with. We may have seen some over-delivery during COVID, because clearly these models were very attractive in COVID. We may be seeing a little bit of a reset back to a more normal kind of growth rate that doesn't have that behind it. But fundamentally, the model seems to work for the consumer. The consumer seems very positive about it. And I think we should kind of take that away. I don't think these models are vanishing. I think they're very definitely here to stay. We would hypothesize that this is a winner-takes-most market. And I emphasize most, not all in that. It's a huge market. That means there'll be some very big sub-players. Amazon has 40% of e-commerce. There are lots of other very big retailers out there. But if we look at the US, we can see the only place where we've got a long history. This is the sales of the 4 leading players. We can see that Carvana has established a really long leadership against the other new auto retailers, and it's been very hard for anyone to challenge that position. And we'd hypothesize that, that generally is going to be the position. But there are 2 things we don't really know yet, one of which is 2 different types of player entering the market. One of which is the dealers, and you can see that the second biggest is now CarMax, the blue line, which has overtaken both Vroom and Shift in terms of its purely online sales. And this measure is just online sales. So we can see that we've got the question of very big dealers. The US has exceptionally big dealers, so it's in a slightly different position from other markets. Can they begin to challenge more seriously now that they're engaging, now that retail functionality is becoming more predominant? And then we've got the real question of classifieds, because classifieds are only just entering this market. And there are a lot of things, I think, that say that classifieds can be very successful in this market if they take the right kind of approaches. So, why do I think, though, that these e-commerce providers are a real threat to classifieds? Aren't they just kind of digital dealers, you might say? What we see is that in time, they will become marketplaces, what we call managed marketplaces. They will sell their own cars, and they will sell third-party dealer and other trade-sourced cars. Why do we believe that? Well, we're already beginning to see it. All of these players have either announced intentions to work with other third parties or are already carrying dealer or trade stock to some level. It's all small at the moment. It's filling gaps in their inventory, etc. But it's quite clear that the model can be extended in this direction. And one of the real kind of strengths of classifieds is the potential to bring the volume of dealers into this marketplace. And if classifieds bring the volume of dealers in as their competitive strength, or one of their key competitive strengths, then we'll undoubtedly see the e-commerce providers respond by pushing further into the dealer space to match the volumes that are there. So I think we should regard these as genuine transactional marketplaces that are broader than just carrying their own stock. So kind of moving on to the second question, what does the car buyer want here? This is Auto Trader's. It's about 2 years old, this chart. Auto Trader's view of how e-commerce breaks down. There's search, there's reserving the vehicle, there's the part exchange, trade-in, there's financing the vehicle if needed, and then there's delivery. You can ask the question about how interested consumers are in lots of different ways. This is a very open question. It's consider. You could get a much lower response if you ask, will you buy your next car? But what I think is really interesting about this is the different percentages at the different stages. Because I think the most interesting number here is how low the delivery number is. Most people aren't really interested in having their car delivered. There are people who are subsets for various reasons that it's a good thing to have the car delivered, but it's not the heart of the proposition. What's really interesting is the numbers in the middle. The 80% that want to deal with the part exchange online. They hate that process of going to the dealer, haggling, going to We Buy Any Car, going to whichever service it is that they sell to. And the level that want finance online. Why wouldn't you want to do your finance online, particularly as the systems to do it get simpler and simpler in terms of their ability to check you and your data electronically without you having to introduce much. So, as we see transaction, this is a very kind of componentized thing. There's a bunch of people who want to do the whole thing, but they're a minority, and there are people who want to do key parts of it along the way. And that is a very good position for classifieds to be in terms of developing their position in the market. So this is a little piece of data from Deloitte, recently produced. Dealers have a bad reputation. Do they? Still. I think dealers' reputations in many markets has changed quite fundamentally over 10 years. And I don't think they get quite the bad rap that they used to get, not least as they're having to change to deal with the many different things going on around them. And what we see in this is that actually, when you ask consumers where they want to buy their car from, a lot of them are very comfortable for their car bought virtually to come from a dealer, particularly from a franchise dealer. Independent dealers, it varies which country, what the level of trust is in the independents, and so on. So again, there's a very good kind of positive perception for classifieds that they can actually perform well with consumers, because actually the consumers are reasonably aligned with receiving their car from a dealer. So let's look at the kind of model and how you develop it. This is the UK, Cazoo. Well, until yesterday, it was 22 customer centers and 11 reconditioning centers. It's now retrenching to save money, make sure it conserves cash. It said it's going down to 8 reconditioning centers, and it hasn't said how many of its customer centers it's trimming. But the principles are, and at the very beginning, they talk about through the Imperial Cars acquisition, which built them out their customer centers, getting typically to be 30 miles away from any individual customer. And if you look at their information, we're pretty sure that the majority of their customers collect their cars rather than have them delivered. So again, this is not about delivery. This is about actually giving the consumer a great online experience of buying the car and then the flexibility to get the car however they want. And Cazoo, very cleverly, they charge just a £100 fee wherever you are, which is not the cost of delivery, but it's enough to incentivize the people who are willing to go to a nearby customer center to go out to the center. So our view of the world is this is very much a kind of hybrid thing. It's not a simple delivery thing. It's a hybrid operation of online and people collecting. So another map, another set of centers. This is all of CarMax's centers across the US. I think if you went and looked at where the population density is, you'd find this is a fabulous fit with the population density of the US. Huge amount of the population on the eastern seaboard, the western seaboard, quite a lot less in the middle. And if you think about it, this is the ideal kind of, or an ideal kind of topology to allow you to take cars from different parts of the country, have them collected locally, etc. And I think one of the interesting challenges for classifieds, this is a big dealer that can do it within its own remit, but how, when you get more into e-commerce, can you get that car delivered from the other end of the country, actually collected locally from a dealer in a useful, easy way? And I think we'll see different kinds of collaborations between marketplaces and dealers to build networks that actually compete effectively with the logistics and the delivery of the new auto retailers. So we think it's a hybrid world. We think there are a lot of good reasons that classifieds can evolve well into this market. So how are they actually doing at the moment? I'm going to start off with a kind of sense of why it's important to them. So, a typical classified, a really high-performing Western European classified might make €55, $60 in revenue from its classifieds for each car that is actually sold that it has been involved in the marketing of. If we look at the transaction's worth $5,000 in revenue. And when I say revenue, here's the breakdown of the revenue. I haven't included the full revenue of the car. For the metal margin, I've just included the gross profit, because clearly the revenue of the car would distort it. But you've got a $5,000 potential revenue pot here to be shooting at. And the question for classifieds is, how far are you going to go into that pot? You can be quite superficial. You can do a light e-commerce approach, and you can skim a bit off that revenue, or you can go much further, much more fundamentally into the transaction, and you can take a much larger piece of that pie. And that's one of the key questions that classifieds need to think about. They also need to think about the question of, well, if I do go much further into the pie, do I actually, do I have to do that to compete? Because actually, if I'm going to compete against these very specialist retailers, are they much better configured to compete than me? Do I really need to get fully into this to make this work? I'm going to come back to one piece of the pie later. The deck will be distributed, so don't worry about scribbling the numbers down. I'm not going to go through them here, but there is clearly a huge kind of revenue opportunity. So how do you go about it as a classified? Your number one key advantage should be volume. If you can access dealers, then you can get dealer-level inventories, and that should be able to beat the stock-holding players, providing, of course, they remain stock-holding. As I said, I think this is a temporary advantage. It is an advantage, but you need to have other things in the toolbox as well. Secondly, low-cost traffic, the brilliance of classified, and the iCar Asia Carson deal is really spot on this, is the value of low-cost traffic. But you've got to be careful here. your traffic as a classified, as an auto-classified, may well be in the wrong place in the funnel to be delivering on e-commerce. So when classifieds get into e-commerce, they need to change the whole way they think about marketing, the kinds of customers they're trying to attract, the kinds of methods they run to market. They need to go much more e-commerce. They need to have a much more fundamental understanding of how to get the customers who really want to buy. And then the third example is the dealer's local presence. This is the thing that the kazoos communicate is the bad thing. You've got to turn that around and turn this into the good thing, because actually having a local presence is fabulous. Having people to service the car, having somebody to talk to locally, being able to go to see it, all of those things are brilliant attributes, but they're things that need to be communicated in a very kind of clear and effective fashion. So, does the volume argument work? Well, in the UK is probably the best test case globally. We've got two pure play players. Cazoo, which is pure play, just built from scratch e-commerce service. We've got Cinch, which is run off the back of the largest B2B wholesaler in the UK, and it's managed to get an advantage, not a huge advantage, but an advantage in volume out of having wholesale behind it. But the number one in volume in the UK now is heycar. It's not selling the most cars yet. It's not promoting in a way that's selling the most cars. It's owned by Daimler, by Volkswagen, by Renault, by the big motor manufacturers. It's open to more joining, and it's bringing franchise dealers into the buy online world. And what we're clearly seeing is that since the beginning of this year, it's built volume far faster. Clearly, it's got the advantage of being in a relationship with the franchise dealers that's slightly different from a marketplace, but I think it really begins to show the potential. And this number keeps growing relative to the competition. So what kind of models have we got out there? We're seeing really two opposing models at the moment develop for classifieds. We're seeing what I call Classifieds Plus, and Auto Trader in the States is a good example. Auto Trader in the UK is moving in the same direction. Under this model, the classified does everything for the dealers. So, these kind of 5 things here to me are the critical test. Who actually sells the car? Well, it's the dealer in the Classified Plus model. Who keeps the finance revenue? Well, it stays with the dealer as it currently does now. Who does the customer service? It's passed to the dealer. Who delivers the car or has it for collection? It's the dealer again. Who owns the customer? This is kind of the most common model that auto classifieds are shooting at. We've then got a second model that's in real contrast to this, which we've called consumer direct. It's what Smile are doing in Germany. And in this model, Smile buys the car just in time to resell it to the consumer. So the retailer, the person who sells the car, the person who owns the car at the time of sale is Smile. Smile is keeping the finance revenue. Smile is running the customer service, so you never speak to the dealer. In fact, the dealer's not involved at all. The delivery is organized by Smile. The customer is fully owned by Smile. The dealer never gets the data. So these are two kind of marked contrasts to each other. The advantage of consumer direct is you really control the proposition. The challenge of Classified Plus is you're relying on the quality of the dealer to match up to the consumer direct. So where do we think this ends up? And heycar comes in again as our example here. It's got this ability to leverage dealers in a different way. But we think we're going to see a blend of these two models. So, in the case of heycar, it's trialing both the dealer selling the car and it's selling the car. So it's looking at both models, but it will probably move more towards it selling the car, we think. It kind of keeps the finance revenue. I mean, it's actually owned by the finance arms of the major OEMs. So, but it still pays out the dealers what they would have got otherwise from the captive finance that they provide. Who runs customer service? Well, actually, that one seems to be decided now. It's absolutely heycar. And I think there's a real issue here. And I think many classifieds don't understand this, that in e-commerce, most transactions actually involve some form of conversation. It could be a phone conversation, it could be a chat, it could be something else. And that's really crucial in closing and determining the sale. So I think that one is going to go any which way in the direction of the service doing the selling, needing to do it. Who delivers? They leave all the fulfillment with the dealer. Who owns the customer? Well, it's mixed. The customer data is shared as far as we know, and shared clearly with the finance providers as it always has been. So we think, we don't think the Classifieds Plus will stand up ultimately. We think there'll be a blend, and we think we will see elements of both these models play out. And there may be different elements for different segments of the audience, because some elements may be really important for premium cars. Some elements may be quite different for cheap cars, which are bought in a different way. So segmentation will become important. What's going to be most critical to success? Well, as we see the key challenges, first of all, it's the proposition. How are you going to be, as a classified, as clear as the new auto retailers are in their proposition? It's crystal clear. You're mixing all of these buy online cars as a classified with lots of cheap classifieds. If you're going the Classified Plus model, you've got different dealers offering different warranties and different standards and whatever. So we think, classifieds have to sort that out. You have to get to a very clear proposition that the consumer understands. Then there's the kind of heavy lifting bits. I'm going to come to trade-ins and finance in a moment, because I think they're the hardest things of all for a classified. Logistics, I think, is actually relatively easy. There are lots of ways that you can handle it. And then there are challenges with the dealers. So availability of cars. If I'm selling a car from a dealer, what happens if they've sold it locally at the point at which my customer wants to buy it? I think that's a problem that will go away over time. It's a problem for now when the volume coming out of e-commerce from classifieds is small, but as it becomes really important to the dealers, they will bend and they will make the cars available in the right way. There's the whole question of margin sharing with the dealers. I don't think the situation of saying, well, there's one model for this will work. I think we will see more sharing, and I think we will see different propositions to different kinds of dealers. There are some dealers that work on a metal margin basis as their core revenue and take very little from finance. There are others who get very little money out of the metal, take a lot out of finance. You have to have different propositions to suit different types of dealers. So we think the revenue sharing will evolve, and it will also evolve as competition develops. There's quality control. I think this is the hardest thing of all. Quality of cars coming out of dealers. Smile takes the car from the dealer, it checks it at its own hub before it sends it on to the consumer to make sure the quality of the car is right and the dealer has met their obligations. And I think it's going to be a really interesting test. Our belief was always that that's probably a temporary measure until they get dealers to deliver the right quality directly from the dealership. But the hints they've given us at Autos Buzz, our conference last 2 weeks ago, are that actually, no, they see this as more of a permanent thing, that it's something that's really quite important to control quality. So that's going to be one of the biggest challenges of all. And then pricing. Well, we think dealers will fall into line on transparent pricing. We think the haggle room will reduce even further than it has already. So the second big thing is buying cars. If you're going to support dealers, they've got huge competition coming at them of trying to buy cars from consumers in order to sell those cars on. You have to, if you're an auto classified, support your dealers to get the cars in the first place against the Cazoos, the Carvanas, their buying programs. There are currently kind of 3 core models that are on offer. Many classifieds have gone with the instant offer. It offers a price range online. Dealers can haggle. There's guaranteed part exchange. Auto Trader have just introduced it to the UK. It requires really great quality data, and usually a wholesaler like Mannheim underwrites the price. So the dealer will guarantee the price, providing the person hasn't lied about the quality of the car. And then there's the auction method. We know it well from the developing world, where it's been the center of the autos transaction model, but it's coming to the developed world as well. And Finn is a good example with its acquisition of Netbill. Our belief is the first model does not work. Haggling around the acquisition of cars on trade-in is going to be a thing of the past. So classifieds have to be in one of these later 2 types of model to successfully help their dealers. And that's going to be quite a challenge. So the other piece that's complex is finance attachment rates, 30% at OLX in Chile, 44% at Cazoo, 76% at CarMax, 81% at Carvana. If we look at e-commerce models, ancillary revenues, which are mostly finance, are literally 50-55% typically of the revenue. So this is fundamental. You have to understand finance to understand this business. I'm out of time, so I'm going to just go to the last couple of slides. So, in all of this, can auto classifieds beat the digital auto retailers? If we go back to the last big discontinuity, which was the move from print to digital classifieds, there's a tendency to think that the insurgents won, the people who came and challenged the print classifieds. And as someone who was at one of the ones that lost on the print classified side, there's a tendency to kind of think and feel that. But actually, if we look out there, there is a good set of the best, strongest names currently in classified that made that transition very successfully. And I'd suggest at the core, most of these did two things. The first one is they treated this new business as a very separate and distinct business from day one. And so they treated it as an operation in its own right and grew it in that way. And secondly, and here, the consumer is facing the choice between e-commerce classifieds, classifieds e-commerce, new auto retailers. The second thing is, I believe they were amongst the best at putting the consumer in the middle. So I think my biggest message for classifieds would be, you have to stand back, have to look at this from a consumer perspective. It's not about functionality, it's about the whole product experience, the whole consumer experience. And those are the things at the heart that will get classifieds into winning positions. So that's the end. Thank you. Sorry for those extra couple of minutes.
Oh, that's
Simon.
okay, don't worry. Now, can we bring up Slido? Thanks, Bruce. Thank you. What role can Amazon play? Now, before we go to that, I remember we had Facebook, and we always talked about Facebook, and that was the big fear factor about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yep.
Disappeared. What role can Amazon play?
So Amazon's tried lots of stuff already. It's tried stuff in the States, but it's at a disadvantage there because it's not allowed to go around the dealers by law. It's tried various initiatives in Europe, both selling and subscription cars. None of them have worked. So our belief is that Amazon could play a role, but it's more likely to be an acquirer, and it's more likely to acquire an interesting business at the right point in time.
Is that driven by the fact that someone, like a Carvana, etc., that's all they do is cars, and they can focus on it and get it right, versus Amazon that's doing everything from, it doesn't matter, right? The whole range of different things. Is focus one of the key issues?
Car e-commerce is one of the most complex businesses around. It looks like just buying a car, but you're talking about a used car, you're reconditioning it, you've got all the logistics challenges, you've got a whole set of consumer issues that are different. 5% of cars are sent back from the consumer to the e-commerce provider, typically. All of those things are very different challenges, and I think Amazon's mindset works perfectly for new goods because they're all pretty much the same, how you ship them, deliver them, etc. You're dealing with complex machines that are individual with their own problems, etc., with used cars.
Okay. Now, how do you see the future of car ownership versus usership?
I think we're going to see quite a lot more usership. I think EVs in particular and the uncertainties around EVs are going to drive that. But I still think people love to own cars. They have lots of different reasons for owning cars. They like possession, etc. So I think we're going to see a much bigger impact of usership, but I still think we're going to see a balanced model over time until we get to automated cars, and then life really does begin to get different.
What do you think about the, I'm going to go to the second question. What do you think about the content creator insurgency into auto marketplaces, CarWow, for example, particularly in new car sales?
So when you mean content creator, you mean the fact that they use content...
That's not me, by the way.
Yeah, no. I'm assuming you mean the fact that they are using content around cars. CarWow's brilliance has been its videos, its clever use of content, and I think it's fundamental to their marketing strategy. I think it works very well.
Okay. Let's do another one. If classifieds move into transactions, become an online dealer, will they not offend their customers who pay for the classified subscription? Basically the same conversation we had before. Are they going to, eat their own lunch?
We've just done a bunch of consulting work talking to people, to dealers in the UK and in Europe. And I think the dealers see the real risk that's coming, and they tell us they still see the real risk that's coming. They understand, many of them, that they can't scale in the same way as a Cazoo or an Auto Hero. And as a result of that, actually, they're willing to engage, they're willing to let the transaction go. And we thought the Smile model would be really difficult for dealers, but actually, the dealers are actually reasonably comfortable at pushing off some of the complexity they have to the marketplaces. And I think marketplaces can be bolder than they are. I think, Smile has proven that. I think Heycar is proving it, although clearly with the manufacturer relationships, it has strong leverage over the franchise dealers. So I think it's a time for boldness, and I think if you're bold, you much better control the customer experience, and you can create a much more effective service. And that's actually a win for the dealer at the end of the day.
Let's do two other quick questions. Let's do the one here. 32% of car buyers wanting home delivery. What do you attribute this for? Why is that occurring? And is that just because we're going from 0% and on our way to something much higher?
Well, no, I think actually you've got to be careful. The question said would consider. I think there are lots of people who would consider. We put a slide up recently. Our view of the world is in 10 years' time, only 10% will take delivery. Most people don't want delivery, they don't need delivery, they're quite happy to go to a collection centre that's close, pick the car up, see it before they collect it, have somebody talk them round it if they're not familiar with it. So I think delivery is a red herring, and I hope that's one of the biggest messages that I can give to classifieds.
Okay, fantastic. Jonathan, thank you very much.